I'm Tony Shepard, 30 years tracking organized retail crime and working major busts.
And I'm Johnny Custer, 30 years turning loss prevention into a profit-driving powerhouse with analytics and strategy.
Every episode, we break down the latest in retail risk, security, and total loss prevention. What's real, what's hype, and what's coming next.
And yeah, we'll probably have some fun along the way.
Welcome to It's Your Loss with Tony and Johnny. Retail crime, retail loss, the future of loss prevention.
Tony Shepard. Hey, how you doing?
I'm good, Johnny. Johnny,
how are you? I'm awesome, man. We're back.
I didn't know we're using full names, but got it.
If somebody doesn't know you. Hey, so welcome to podcast number 2. I'm hearing that some people actually watched the first one, so apparently we're allowed to keep going.
Apparently so. I'm not sure how many, and if they watched the whole thing, but yeah, apparently people clicked on it. So
let's try to not be that long this time.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. That was my biggest takeaway from the last one. Is in the end, I think sometimes when you just are bantering back and forth, you don't realize how long you've been talking. So yeah.
Yeah, I realized a couple things as well. Number one, I don't look great in 4K. Number two, I can actually change the color of my camera, and I actually look like President Trump on there because I was orange. So I'm going to go ahead and change the lighting so I don't look like that anymore. Why don't you tell everyone about our first guest?
Yeah, sure. So Rhett Asher, he obviously is a titan in our industry, as you know. I know you know him as well. I've known him for a long time. He's worked for a few different organizations. I'm sure we'll touch on that during the call. But as a matter of fact, he actually worked at Think LP for a while I was there. I'm here now, but he was there when I first came to Think LP. So he had been in the industry a long time. A good friend of mine, and excited to have him on, certainly.
Awesome. Hey.
And look at that. Here we go. Rhett.
King of the devil.
We're on the video, at least, virtually. There we go. Rhett Asher, in person.
Hey, Rhett. Thanks for joining us today, man.
Yeah, man. I appreciate it, man. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, it's great to see you. So listen, let's get started, because we learned last time that talking for an hour and a half is a bit too much. So we're going to try and compress this down into a more digestible sized podcast.
Perfect.
Listen, so Rhett, we'll jump into the Rhett origin story as we move forward, I'm sure. I know Tony's got a lot of great questions there, but if you don't mind, please tell everyone about your current role and how long you've been a part of the Alto team.
Okay, yeah. So I am the Senior Vice President of Partnership Development here at Alto, and basically that means I own the marketing division of Alto for the U.S. I own client services, so once a client comes on board, taking care of them in their journey with Alto. And then also the sales and business development piece of Alto, all the outreach and talking to all my buddies in the industry about why they should come and be part of the Alto family. So I've been here just over 3 years. And, I made the jump here because this was one of those rare opportunities, guys, where we all talk about our entire careers about, giving back. And a lot of times that's around charities or, things that are important to us in life. But I grew up in retail. I mean, literally, I've never had another job in my life other than retail. And so it was really about giving back. And so this is just one of those rare opportunities where you get to work for a company and do something that makes the industry a little better. So
did somebody just open a beer? Is that it's open a beverage. That's what it sounded like. I've heard somebody open a beer before, and that's what it sounded like.
Oh, that would be weird and inappropriate.
Okay.
So, Rhett, if you don't mind, for the audience, talk a little bit about Alto. I mean, obviously, we know a lot about Alto, and we're doing some great work with you and your team. But can you tell the audience about Alto Alliance? How does it work? Where did it come from? And what's it all about?
Yeah. So basically, just real quick, Alto is a company that works with retailers and frankly, other businesses, anybody that has business disruptions, to kind of mitigate those disruptions that happen in the stores that affect the safety and well-being of the associates and the customers. And we basically do that by, receiving incident reports from those retailers, i.e. from a company like Think LP, and then working those incidents through key community stakeholders. So that's law enforcement, that's the DA's office, that's other community organizations, maybe that organizations that work with the unhoused or homeless populations, or mental health rehab centers, things like that, all with the goal of mitigating those disruptions from a recidivist level and ensuring that we're solving the problem. We're not just kind of kicking the can down the road for somebody else to solve. And basically, it's holding all of those stakeholders accountable. So we talk a lot about holding offenders accountable, right, for their actions, but it's also about how can we, through a strategic partnership, help hold law enforcement accountable. In other words, getting them the resources or the information they need to build the case, gather all the data that's necessary to present to the prosecutor, and then holding the prosecutor accountable by, again, ensuring that they're not spinning their wheels and they have all the information they need to prosecute a successful case or provide some sort of adjudication, the appropriate adjudication to whatever the crime is, right? Making the punishment fit the crime, so to speak.
Wow. I would have loved to have had a group like yours back when I was detaining shoplifters.
Right.
It would have helped tremendously, I think.
Yeah, I think, Rhett, obviously we hear a lot about arrests. I don't know if you guys caught, there was a recent article or a news clip from CNBC where they did the national, I'm assuming you guys heard about the national blitz that was done recently, which is great. I mean, I think it's good to see, retailers and law enforcement and prosecutors all working together. But I think, to this point, there's also that next step, right, to ensure, like, it's great to talk about all the arrests that are made and everything else, but obviously if there's no consequence, there's no follow up, then it's just then we're just patting each other on the back and what's the end solution, or what's the what actually is solved basically by doing that. So that makes sense. Obviously, what you guys are doing over there at Alto.
Look, too many people put a lot of work into ensuring that these people get arrested in the first place, right? I mean, Tony, Johnny, we all know, we grew up in this industry. So we know the effort that it takes for retail investigators to work these cases, to get enough data to ensure that they're arrested. We know law enforcement's working hard at doing that. But at the end of the day, if all you're doing is arresting them and then they get cut loose, you're not solving the problem. And that's what we're trying to mitigate.
Well, I'll tell you what, let's not get too far in the weeds on career paths just yet. I want to understand a little bit more about what makes Rhett. So let's go all the way back to the beginning, if you don't mind, Rhett. And I hope we don't get too personal on you here. But the goal of this podcast is just for everybody to get to know you a little bit better and understand how you've become kind of the industry titan that everybody sees you as today. And I know you may not consider that, but I know I do. I know Tony does. So tell us a little bit about where you grew up. Where'd you grow up? Where are you from?
Well, first of all, I do want to say there's a lot of people in this industry that are way more Titanish than I am. I've been super lucky, and we can talk about that. But yeah, listen, I grew up both in kind of the Washington, D.C. area and in North Carolina, just north of Raleigh and Durham, a small town called Henderson. Two parents that split up when I was really young. Dad lived in the D.C. area. Mom had a lot of family down in the Carolinas. And so spent time in both those places growing up. And really my first kind of, my first dive into retail was my mother was a director of marketing for a company called Roses back in the day. And today they're kind of variety wholesalers, or they're owned by that. And I think there may be two Roses left around. But yeah, she was in marketing there. And when I was in high school, when everybody was out priming tobacco and doing all the, the Carolina Hit Boy thing, I was like, man, that stuff makes me puke. I got to find something that is easier to do. And so my mom actually got me my first job at Rose's warehouse, one of their big warehouses. And I was loading trucks all summer long for them. Did that for 3 or 4 summers throughout school, and then worked in their stores during the winter, when the temp help wasn't needed in the warehouses anymore. So that was kind of the bug that bit me, to be honest, and how I got started.
Yeah. So you essentially started off in operations, for lack of a better description, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
How far did you go with that?
Well, so I spent more than 20 years in retail operations. So, that was the bug that bit me. And then, after school, I moved up to the DC area, and first retail job I had there as a real adult was working for a company called Best Products. If you remember those.
Oh my, wow, way back.
Rooms. So there were three, right? There was W Bill, Best Products, and Service Merchandise. And I worked for Best Products, and my first management role was assistant department manager of camera sports. And so that was my first big boy job.
Write that on a business card.
Yeah. It was fun, but I had a great mentor there that was the store manager at the time that saw something in me and really mentored me up through kind of that operational side of the business. I eventually became a system store manager and then a store manager for them for a number of years, and then just kind of moved through the operational path really for a number of years with different retailers.
I remember so you guys are from the same generation I am. It was Christmas catalogs, right? It was the JCPenney catalog, the Sears catalog, but then Best Products moved into the Cleveland market where I grew up, and they had the best toys.
Yeah.
They had the best electronics, at the time, and the best toys. So I always look forward to the Best Products catalogs and to going into those stores. It's really cool that you spent some time there.
Yeah.
I like how you softly mentioned our ages there, Johnny. That was really clever. You didn't say we're all old. You just kind of said we all grew up in the same, was it all the same generation or something to that effect? That's very clever.
Anybody that watched the last podcast and saw my face in 4K knows how old I am.
Wow. Hey, why do you think I keep my head shaved, man? And then I keep people guessing.
Yeah. So back to business a little bit. So Rhett, growing up in operations, I always find it's interesting to talk to people that have an operations background and kind of get an understanding of what was your impression of loss prevention as you were growing up as an operator. Were you aware of them? Did you have any preconceived notions?
Yeah. So, this goes a little bit when we were kind of pre-talking about, what is something people don't know about you. So when I moved to North Carolina and kind of started in that area, my mom was pretty dirt poor, even though she worked for this big company. We were two kids, my sister and I, and she didn't make a lot of money back then, right? In marketing, it sounds like a great job. But at the time, we're talking about the early 80s, right? So I don't know, maybe she was making, 40 grand or something like that, 35 grand. And we didn't have a lot. And so I really learned at an early age that you got to soak up everything. If you don't teach yourself, if you don't really try to learn things and aggressively look for ways to better yourself, you're going to be stuck in the same place you've always been. And so one of the things I did as an operator, and I loved retail, by the way, I gravitate toward, my personality is very much about helping people and doing stuff for others. But what I really learned was to understand the rest of the business. And so while I loaded trucks for, Roses at the time and Ross, really a unique industry, right? That catalog showroom, because everything's warehoused above and it would come down on a conveyor belt, and it was kind of cool. And so I took the time to learn kind of how that operation worked. But throughout my operations career, I understood, even though at the beginning I was like, big brother, LP come in and everybody's pushing stuff under racks and hiding stuff. And are the keys secured and all that kind of crap? Is the back door locked? While it was a pain in the butt, I quickly learned how important it was to have LP partner and to make sure that, that you were buttoned up and that you understood the importance of the whole operation. Goose! And for those of you that don't know, I had dinner with Goose not long ago.
Yeah, sorry for the interruption. This is Goose, and by the way, she sees me in a whole new light because apparently our podcast is on YouTube, and so I'm a YouTuber now, and so she appreciates that more. So,
Tommy, you're an influencer. Congratulations!
Yes.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. But anyway, I quickly learned how important it was to understand that piece of the business. And then eventually, I gravitated towards that as well, like a lot of us do. But yeah, I saw them as a very strategic partner. And if you wanted to be successful, you really needed to understand what was important to them, because at the end of the day, that helped the organization as a whole.
Yeah, that makes sense. Tony, I got a million questions for Rhett, so I'm just going to keep rapid firing. If you got some stuff, I know there's some stuff you want to talk about, just jump in and shut me up. But Rhett, just to piggyback off of that, what was your understanding of shrink? I'm very curious. I mean, we're talking, I don't want to date us, but I'm guessing this was in the early 90s, late 80s-ish period, right? What was your perception of shrinkage at the time, and what the causations were, and how does that vary from what you know now?
Well, so I think that changed over the years as I was growing up in operations. Like at the beginning, I have to be honest, I thought, most shrink is just, lost or stolen merchandise, right? You don't really think about it beyond that. It wasn't until I worked for a company, again, I'm going to date myself, Herman Sporting Goods. Remember those guys?
Yeah.
Based out of Carteret, New Jersey. And they had shoes. And so that's when I learned about mismates, and I learned about vendor fraud, and I learned about all kinds of things. So I think as you grow up in the industry, your perception of shrink kind of adapts or changes or broadens, I guess is a better word. So my understanding at the beginning was, it's stuff people steals. Stuff people steal. Sorry, showing my my redneck background. But beyond that, I think you start to learn so much more. And then today, right, we talk about total loss, and you understand that there's a million things that go into that, and how important it is to understand that causation, as you talked about, because it does. It's more than just some stolen product.
So Rhett, if 2025 Rhett can go back in time and talk to the best products Rhett and the operator Rhett, what would you tell him about loss prevention now versus then? And how would you raise his awareness? Because I know a lot of LP folks struggle with talking to their operating partners and knowing what's important to them. And we're often told to kind of stay in our lane, go catch you bad guys. But as you just mentioned, it's a much bigger picture, right? It's not just about catching bad guys. So how would you spread that message back to yourself? And then ultimately, how should we do it with our operating partners today?
Yeah, man, that's a great question. I'd like to say, I think my instinct reaction was to say, listen, it's bigger than you think it is, and really soak up as much as you can because it's important. And maybe in saying that to best products, Rhett, I might have been further along quicker, because obviously it's a process, right? And it takes time to really understand it. So I probably would have given myself a little bit of a nudge to do things maybe with more urgency. But I think sometimes organic learning is just what happens, that you learn through experience. And so while I think you could go back and give yourself a few pointers, I also think there's something to be said for being in the moment and learning in the moment. And those experiences, Tony, I watch a lot of your posts and read your stories about, your first loss prevention apprehension you had, you almost died, right? Because a guy had a knife. Like, I pay attention to those things, but those are the learnings that made you who you are today, because every time you had that experience, you adapt it. And so I think, if anything, I would just say, stay the course. This is a great industry. Hey, by the way, you're going to stay in the industry your entire life. So have fun and get used to it. But I don't know beyond that what I would say, other than, hey, you're going to meet some great people, have a blast, and soak it up.
Yeah, Rhett, one of the things, so I know that, obviously you spent a lot of time, as in operations, right, as a practitioner, and then, some LP experience as well. But you've done a lot of things, right, in the industry. And I know that some of that was with the different various trade organizations, right, that are out there that support the industry. And I may be wrong on the order here, so apologize, but I believe it was RILA first, or do I have that wrong? Okay, since RILA first did. From your standpoint, obviously I've worked with them a lot. I know Johnny has as well, and not just RILA, obviously RILA, NRF, FMI, all the different groups like LPRC now in today's day as well. We can add them to that list. But what was it like at RILA? Like, can you tell us a little bit about your time at RILA and, what was your focus? And because that was the first one, again, first trade association you worked at.
And even how you got there. Like, how did you, what made you decide to join the dark side?
It's funny. I talk about, soaking up as much as you can and ensuring that, like, I had this saying throughout most of my career, which was never miss an opportunity to meet somebody new. And that was, how many times are you sitting around and I'm paraphrasing, but I don't mean it literally, but you're sitting around and somebody goes, oh, let's go to this event, or, hey, you should meet this person, and we go, do I have the time? Do I whatever? And I tried, because of all the things I've said so far, to never miss those opportunities. So 2 things happened that led me to RILA. One was, when I was in operations, I worked for Ross for a small time. And at Ross, I met an LP person that really changed, I'm not going to say changed my life, but changed my perception of loss prevention to where it is today. And that was Mike Kean. He was vice president of loss prevention at Ross. And when I was an operator there, we met. And one of the stories I have is that he showed up at the store. I was they called it back in then, I want to say it was like a district operations manager. So I had about 8 Ross stores in that DC, Baltimore area that I was in charge of. And I was housed at the Columbia Ross location. And Mike would come occasionally, and he showed up one day and he said, listen, our senior vice president of operations is going to do an East Coast trip, and she's going to hit some of your stores. And some of these stores were not performing well. And so he goes, I really need you to have these stores buttoned up, blah, blah, blah. We talked. Well, a few weeks later, she shows up and he's with her, and there's, this entourage, right, of senior corporate
People with clipboards.
And, they're walking around the stores. We did a couple of store visits. And at the end, like maybe 3rd store in, she pulls me aside. And again, this is a senior vice president of operations. And she says, these stores feel good. And Mike just kind of, looked, and I kind of looked, and I'll never forget that, because it wasn't, hey, Rhett, the store's clean, or hey, Rhett, the store's, buttoned up, or hey, your shrink numbers are great, or your sales numbers are up, or whatever. It was, these stores feel good. And Mike later told me that what she meant was she saw a completely different store. She saw happy customers. She saw, engaged employees. She saw, most things in order, right? Nothing's ever perfect. But it was such a great visit. And he was like, man, thank you, And then it was like a year later that I went to RILA, and I'll tell you how I got there. And I bumped into Mike, and I was at RILA, brand new guy out of retail, at this trade association at a conference for the first time. And I bump into Mike, and in front of about 4 VPs of loss prevention who I had just met, he goes, oh my God, Rhett, what are you doing here? He goes, this guy is one of the best operators I've ever met. This guy. And those 4 or 5 VPs that were there were like, oh, okay, so this guy's legit,
That's a hefty endorsement coming from Mike. Mike was a legend.
So not only did Mike kind of mentor me a little bit while I was at Ross, he then did me a huge solid by giving me instant credibility in front of people that, again, I may not have ever met in my life. And who knows how long it would have taken to get to know these guys without that endorsement, right? Because I would have had to gone through the whole, who the hell is this guy? And as many people do in the association world. And so that, I just wanted to say that because Mike deserves a lot of credit for that. And he was somebody that really, truly made an impact on me in a multitude of ways. So just that. But asking how I got to RILA. So in the spirit, again, of kind of your personal life and your work life blending, I coach soccer. A lot of people know that I have a daughter, and I had a stepdaughter at the time, and they both played soccer for a number of years. And I coached for 15 years, girls soccer. And I coached 2 teams from 2nd grade all the way through high school. Wow. And so one of the girls that I was coaching years ago worked for RILA, or sorry, her mom worked for RILA. And so she knew she would come into my stores to buy things. She would be at the practice field. And one of the things, he approached me at a practice one day and said, "Hey, Rhett, I've seen how you interact with the parents. I've seen how you interact with the kids. I've seen how you interact with customers in the stores." And da-da-da. And she goes, "Hey, we have an opening at RILA, and I'd really love to talk to you about it." And
Okay, hold on. I got to write this down. Key to success in loss prevention, coach girls soccer.
that's exactly right. But it really,
I have no idea.
I think Rhett should elaborate on how he coached soccer and some of the things that he taught, because I've heard this story. I don't know if he wants to share, but maybe the aggressiveness of play.
Were the ball buster?
my girls were so badass. It wasn't even funny. Like, I tell you, we played indoor one time and we were so aggressive, not dirty. I need to be clear, right? Because soccer is a contact sport. But we were playing indoor one time against a team we played a lot every season outdoor. We were literally whipping this team's rear end. And by halftime, the coach walks out in the middle of the field and he goes, "We're done. We're done." And he grabs his girls and like, "Get out of here." And they all left the field. And all my girls are like, "What happened, coach?" And I said, "You kicked some ass."
We'll remember that game for the rest of their lives.
Oh my God. It was, they were I don't know how to explain it, but these two teams that I coached for years were just amazing kids. I still am connected to a lot of them that, hey, I got married. Hey, I graduated college. Hey, I had my first kid. I got to tell you, those were some of my most fun times was coaching and making those,
Cool.
life impacts on kids that in turn made life impacts on me too. So,
All right. So you got this experience in operations and you're being touted around and getting some legitimacy, for lack of a better description, from Mike in the industry. And now you've been asked to take on this role in RILA. How do you immerse yourself in the loss prevention culture and kind of shift your mindset and get an understanding? Because look, you're thrown right into a leadership role. You're at the forefront. I mean, RILA is still today, but even then, a big deal.
Yeah. No, that's true. And listen, I was very humbled by the opportunity. I guess a couple of things I did. One was, so, in addition at the time anyway, and I know it's sort of similar now, but it's evolved. We had a leaders council, right? Or a main group of VPs and senior directors and all leaders of LP, some great men and women that I met early on. And then we had some subcommittees, right? Some smaller, more specific, role-specific committees.
Yeah.
Because I came from operations, I knew operational audit, and we did not have an operational audit committee. And so I went path of least resistance. How can I bring knowledge of what I know to a group that, I started asking around about it, and they were all like, "Man, that'd be a great group." And so I developed the first operational audit group for RILA that consisted of, again, some amazing people that worked for these VPs, right? I would go to them and say, "Hey, do you have somebody that might be interested in this committee?" So that gave me some credibility. And then in addition, I didn't walk into this leaders council and assume I knew what they wanted to talk about, what was important to them. So I took the stance of, listen, I'm here to help bring you guys together to solve problems in the industry and to benchmark and to, do some research, whatever it was to move the industry forward. And I let them educate me, frankly. I knew the industry well enough that I spoke the language. But I certainly never said, "Here's what we're going to do." I said, "Hey guys, how can we move this industry forward? What's important to you? We got a conference to put together. We've got these committees. We've got research to do, help guide me." And I think the only credit I can take is that I tried to do a great job of keeping everybody focused so that, kind of like with what I do today, there's an outcome, right? There's a successful outcome to whatever the role we were playing. So,
yeah. I never put two and two together before, but I can't help but wonder, RILA, out of all the associations now, RILA is probably the one that wears their operations passions on their sleeve more than anyone else, talking about the total retail loss movement and all the things that the team does now around operations. I can't help but think that maybe you set that foundation over there.
Maybe. I mean, listen, if nothing else, I uncovered something that, was needed and maybe was kind of already sitting in the wings. And just by asking the right questions and poking the bear a little bit, I was able to find that. So again, just right place, right time, but certainly don't want to take the credit because that group worked really hard. And,
Sure.
And listen, and frankly, they've continued to do great things, right? I mean, it's a strong organization, and they're moving the needle, and they've got great people working there. So,
And Rhett, before we dive in, again, I know there's a couple other associations you worked for directly, but Loss Prevention Foundation, correct me if I'm wrong, right? But I think that you were involved in that in the early beginnings, if I remember. I believe you're still a big supporter of that, as am I. And I know Johnny is as well. But can you tell us a little bit about Loss Prevention Foundation and what your involvement was in that? Just some of your thoughts on that group.
Yeah, it's funny. I got asked that at last year's LP Magazine annual meeting, and I was able to get up and talk. And I think there were a handful of people that didn't realize that I was involved in that. So yeah, it was really a group of us sitting around talking about how we can better educate loss prevention professionals to understand the broader business of retail, right, and bring an education. So it was kind of twofold. It was, how can we take an industry that typically doesn't have a lot of college graduates in it, right, and really help them ease into this industry in a stronger, faster, better way. But then also, how can we bring education to the industry that allows them to learn other areas, right, and be more total loss focused or total industry focused? Because at the time, and retail is that roller coaster, right? There were a lot of people being laid off. It was a tough time in retail. And so it was like, well, are they going to lay off somebody who knows all the business? Maybe they move this person to another area, right? And that VP of loss prevention now becomes the VP of supply chain loss prevention, or, some other area, audit or something. So it was really about, we chase ORC, we chase, shrink, we chase all these typical loss prevention functions or problems. But in addition to that, how can we bring better education? And so I was involved. It was myself. It was Kevin McMenamin and some of the leaders, Paul Jones, and some guys and gals on the retail side. And then Jim Lee was a big part of it. And we all just kind of got together and said, let's start this 501c3 educational entity and bring it to fruition. And so my role was twofold. It was, how do I sell this to the industry, both on the retail side and the solutions provider side? Because obviously you needed capital to get it started. And so that was my first function. And then second was, how do I get some groups of people together, start building the content? And so, raising money to start the foundation and getting the buy-in. Listen, getting people to buy something that there was no tangible product is not easy, people. And I got to tell you, it was not easy, but it was also fun and exciting because it was something that was different. But then once I got everybody excited about it, bringing them together to say, hey, now you can be a role of building this education, and we're going to focus in these 6 areas, or these 5 areas. Do you want to be involved? And I think once it started to kind of get the ball rolling, people got excited about it. And listen, everybody after me has done a tremendous job of bringing this thing to the industry. It's powerful. And I know it's changed a lot of people's lives as far as just either getting them into the industry, helping them succeed in the industry, or just being a great educational tool for people.
For me, it was always about that credibility and legitimacy. We don't all have.
You just took the words right out of my mouth, Johnny. I was literally going to say credibility. Absolutely. I think prior to that, it was, LP is LP kind of. It was not even thought of as like a profession, if you think about it. Even there's a lot of folks obviously in the industry for many, many years like ourselves. I don't know that it was looked at.
No, we were purgatory, right, Tony? We were purgatory for either ex-cops or people waiting to become cops.
Yeah, it has come so far, and I credit the LPF with giving us that credibility. I mean, you think about it, you mentioned, college. A lot of folks that hadn't gone to college. Now it's almost reversed. Now you have actually courses taught in some colleges on loss prevention. I mean, who would have ever thought that would happen? So, just a great organization, and you must be proud to have been a part of that, and it's come a long way. And I do credit it for giving the industry the credibility that it has today. So
for sure. All right, so you've been the vice president of loss prevention at one of the major retail associations. It's your trial by fire into the loss prevention mindset. You're sitting around with a group of other legends and you create the Loss Prevention Foundation as a group and change the industry forever. Then you go off and do a little thing called vice president of loss prevention at NRF.
Yeah. Listen, everybody, it's funny, back in the day, let's go 2006, 2007, Joe LaRocca was leading the NRF at the time. And listen, the two associations is no secret. They didn't get along great. There were two camps of people in the industry, right? Ones that really loved NRF and ones that grew up kind of in the RILA camp. And of course, the two people running the associations were, supposed to not get along. And I'd say, I think Joe and I, at the beginning, there was a little of that, hey, I'm going to get my associations better. But I think through that, I give Joe as much credit as anybody. We found a way, kind of without anybody paying attention, to actually say, what are we doing? Like, let's find a way to work together. And I think they're kind of at the end of my time at RILA and my time with the Loss Prevention Foundation. Joe and I just found maybe it's not a best buddy friendship, but it was certainly a mutually respectful relationship. And I have to say another funny story is when I started at RILA, I'm not going to name any names. So I started at RILA.
Oh, name names.
I was at a NRF conference. So I started let's call it March or April with RILA. Their conference that year had just ended. They strategically brought me in so I'd have a whole year, right, to work with the team. But after a few months, they sent me to the NRF show, so I'd just get an understanding of how NRF operated and what their conference was like. And I remember meeting an executive at NRF, and the person that I was with from RILA introduced me to this person at NRF. And, hi, how you doing? Blah, blah, what's your background? Okay, great. Nice to meet you, and walk away. And then about a couple hours later, the person from RILA must have bumped into that person from NRF. And this wasn't Jim, by the way. This person from NRF looked at that person and said, oh, he'll never make it. And she was like,
challenge accepted.
Yeah. And it was like, he'll never make it. Like he's not going to make it in this world, the association world. So it's kind of funny that I do like to look back after 3 associations and the LPF and go, yeah, really? That's the one pompous thing I'll say. But you're right. Challenge accepted. I was like, really? Like, you don't even know me. To say that to somebody that works with me was kind of crappy. But anyway, Joe and I built this respectful friendship, I think. And when Joe wanted to get out of NRF and do his own thing, he called me and said, would you be willing to take my spot? And so I do credit Joe with setting me up with that spot at NRF. And frankly, at the time, you're like, hey, NRF's the biggest trade association in the industry. It'd be kind of cool to work for them. And so I took that opportunity to go work with NRF. And again, super great, mix of executives that I work closely with. And the people at NRF were great. The organization, well run, just great people there. And I learned a lot. I mean, you learn a different thing, right? RILA was made up at the time of mostly your big box retailers. So that was kind of the crowd I hung with. And then with NRF, it was more of the, mall-based retailers and your what do you talk about, like your Dollar Generals and your, those kind of things. So there was a very different group of retailers there. And so I do credit those opportunities with giving me access to men and women that, I would have never had access to. So when I say I'm humbled by this industry and I got lucky in a couple of ways, it is, I got an opportunity that most don't get. And, and I tried to do.
I got a quick Joe LaRocca story for us. So I love Joe LaRocca, by the way, but I was brand new to my role, managing organized retail crime. And I went to NRF. I don't know if it was run by NRF. It was kind of run by NRF, like a task force on ORC. And I go to this meeting. I don't remember what company hosted it, but I'm there at a big board table. And I had just signed an agreement with one of the online platforms to collaborate with them. And at the time, there was some push for some online legislation. And it was like a mutiny. I literally had people physically wadding up paper and throwing it at me during the meeting. Like, how could you do that? And I'm like, well, they offered to help and, blah, 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 whatever. And I thought it was funny because, fast forward, and then a ton of retailers signed up with that agreement with that online marketplace. And it turned out to be very helpful. And obviously fast forward now, and we have that, legislation and in a different form, obviously, but in Form Act legislation. But I just thought it was funny because that was one of the first interactions I had with Joe, where he was not happy with me. And then Future stayed. I got to go with Joe to the Capitol several times to push for various legislation and stuff when we became very close. But yeah, it's just interesting that my first interaction was not a pleasant one with Joe and that group. I'll say that, to say the least.
So you were with CVS at the time, correct?
Yes.
So another little funny kind of bit of history that people may not remember or know is when I was at RILA, NRF was very, that specific online platform adverse. And on the RILA side, we were trying to get them to sit at the table with some of our retailers to discuss the problem. And that platform was very, that's not our problem. We're the platform. It's not our product that's being sold there. And so Paul Jones, myself, and a few other retailers, we were actually able to get eBay that online platform that starts with a D to sit at the table with us and talk about the problem. And then that's when they agreed to do that test of gift cards. And I remember you guys being a part of that because I think at the time, Ernie Dolly might have been the VP there. And Ernie wanted to solve the problem too. And so you guys were involved. And I remember, again, the NRF and Joe, they didn't really see the value in it because they were trying to stop them from selling gift cards. But through that's, I think, when Joe and I actually found that mutual respect for each other because when I transitioned over and Joe got involved kind of in that and they kind of saw the progress that was being made, I think still they were a little hesitant, but I think that was one of the things where Joe and I worked so closely together on that I think it helped us in building that relationship. So listen, this industry teaches you a ton if you're willing to open yourself up and be innovative and try new things and go where no man has gone before, so to speak. I think it's well,
let's follow that segue. Go where no man has gone before. So then you go and spend like a half a decade at FMI.
Yeah,
working with a lot more of a specially niche group of the industry. What was that like?
That was really cool. I have to say that I learned a ton because that's when you talk about total loss, right? Then you're getting into things like, because these are grocers, right? And there was some drug and some convenience as part of it, but it was typically grocery. And that's where you learn about spoilage and you learn about all kinds of other areas that retailers lose money. But you also, in grocery, what I learned there in meeting the loss prevention people with these grocers is that grocery is almost like a family more so than other retailers. Like I remember Ed Crenshaw, who was the CEO of Publix at the time when I was there. And he started as a bagger in Publix. And I don't think he was part of the original family, but he was like a cousin, and he started as a bagger and worked his all the way up to CEO. And it's like these people stay with these companies forever.
They do.
Their family, like, meeting, and just, I'm drawing a blank, but so many of these grocers are families, the Festival Foods and the Weiss Markets and meeting these CEOs and how just normal they were, right? Because these are companies their family started or they've grown up in. It was a really neat experience. I learned a ton about a different level of shrink. I met a lot of really humbled, family driven people. And frankly, yeah, I was there the longest because I had so much fun there. I was able to rebuild, a loss prevention offering with FMI that had kind of gone away for a few years. And, they gave me some autonomy to really do some cool things. And it was fun. I really enjoyed it.
Just to touch on that a little bit, Rhett. So a couple things. One is that if you recall, I actually did a presentation for you once at FMI, and ironically enough, it's a very kind of taboo topic, if you will, right? Because it was in reference to product diversion, right? And stolen product and counterfeit product and how it gets back into the supply chain. And I think it's interesting because I think at the time, NRF and RILA, I think since then they've touched on those topics, but at that time, they weren't really willing to go there. And you actually asked me to come speak about that topic, which I think was very, impactful. At least I like to think so, because I did the presentation, but ironically enough, after that presentation, I was out inspecting a supplier actually for the company I worked for. And they said, wait a minute, you guys were just here last week. And I don't know, I wasn't. It was another person, a company that sat through that session that actually never said a word, never asked a question, but did what I said. But I just think I give you kudos for allowing me to present the topic, because again, it was a very taboo. I think it still is today, quite frankly, but I think back then it certainly was. And so yeah, I appreciate you doing that. And obviously, I'm passionate about the topic, so I was more than happy to do that, to speak on that. I forgot what my second point was because I'm in my 50s. So I don't know what that was. So we can move on.
Listen, I do remember that. And one of the things I always thought about when working with our steering committees or our leaders councils at the time to put these conferences together was something I told all of them every time we sat down to do this is, how do we make sure that when people show up to this conference and then leave, that they leave with better, something better than what they came with, whether that's they saw a speaker that just made them better personally or professionally, or they heard about a topic, to your point, that maybe is a little outside the lines or that's new and innovative or just makes them think. I just think it's important that when you interact with somebody that you do something in that interaction or relationship that leaves them feeling better or learning something. Because then they're always going to rely on you for that, or they're always going to come to you or see you as somebody that's innovative. And so that was kind of the mantra that I used every time, I work with people for a conference.
Love it. All right, Rhett, you've done great answering a lot of questions about your background and things that you'd be very comfortable answering. Let's veer into some less comfortable territory, if you don't mind.
Yeah, man.
We're trying to figure out how to learn a little bit more about the folks that we're talking to and learn things that people may not know about them. So I was trying to come up with some ideas, and Tony and I put our heads together. We came up with a couple of questions that we think will give a fresh perspective about Rhett Asher and now all he represents. So let's talk about guilty pleasures. Tell me about a guilty pleasure Rhett song that you throw on whenever you're feeling, I don't know, happy, sad, or something, your go-to guilty pleasure song.
Well, I talked earlier about coaching girls soccer. So clearly I had a daughter and a stepdaughter. And so as dads of girls, we all know that we get sucked into, these certain shows or certain music that they're listening to. And at the time that my daughter was growing up, I don't know, she was probably, in that 4 to 6 range, 7, something like that. I don't remember exactly. And Kim Possible was a cartoon that was on TV, and about this girl and her, little friend Ron Stoppable that used to solve crimes. And they had a theme song that was, you can do the things that can't be done, Kim Possible, and it was this song. And it just had an impression on me. And so whenever I get in that mood where I just need to feel really fun and happy and go to a neat place, I put that song on. So, Kim Possible, one of my faves.
I'm glad that it had that much power over you and it was able to influence you. You know, most of us were influenced by Sesame Street and the Electric Company and stuff when we were 3 or 4, but it's nice to hear that in your adulthood, you were greatly influenced by Kim Possible. That's a neat story.
Yeah.
Good
times.
Neat. I like the song "I Had a Bad Day" because it makes me think about all the folks that I had arrested over the years, and so when I get down, I just play that song, and that's what gets me motivated. It's probably sadistic a little bit, but it does. So I told you about that video, Johnny, that I made, I believe, with that.
Yeah.
With that.
Yeah.
Whatever.
I'm a girl dad too, Rhett, just like Tony and yourself, and I found myself at the theater watching the Lego Movie. And I don't know if you've heard the song "Everything Is Awesome." It's one of the theme songs.
I don't know that I could sing it.
If you got to give it a listen. It's definitely, if you listen to it with a sarcastic ear, it's something that you'll implement into your everyday life. I find myself singing it to myself walking down the street.
That's awesome.
So speaking of favorite guilty pleasure, hobby or activity, what do you do to keep yourself busy that you would be embarrassed to tell anybody about?
I don't know if I'm embarrassed, but it's funny. I enjoy antiquing. So, like, you know, if you go into
Shut the front door, Rhett.
I swear to God, and my wife.
I would never guess that one. I think we get it.
When Maria and I, we met, we were looking for, you know, things to do together, and we, you know, travel, or we'd be in a little town and it'd be a little, you know, antique row, right, where there'd be antique shops. And she'd be like, you know, I think she was doing it to test me early on. She's like, oh, let's go antiquing. Let's go to a few antique shops, thinking I'd be typical and go, oh, really? I don't want to do that. And I'm like, sure. And after the first couple times we did it, like, I could lose myself in these little shops, like looking at every trinket, uncovering stuff, looking. And she was finally like, dude, we've been in here 2 hours. Like, can we go? And I'm like, but I've only been through half the shop, you know? And so I don't know what it is, but I like looking at the past. I like looking at, like, treasures, people's treasures that you would never see unless you were in their house, you know, in their attic or something, which would be creepy, or in an antique shop. So I love doing that, frankly. I can spend hours.
Isn't there a show? Isn't there like a show like virtual? Yeah, where they go through it. Yeah.
Yeah, these old folks bring their family treasures to the table, and then they tell them, oh, it could be worth millions of dollars, or it could be worth $3, and then they break everyone apart. It's a good show.
Yeah.
So Rhett, what is your favorite antiquing that you've ever antiqued? Have you purchased anything that you're exceptionally proud of? Some major find, a treasure hunt?
You know, I've never been lucky enough to find that. Oh my God, it's worth $1 million. I'm tired. Yeah, I found things like, I guess the two that stand out. When I lived in the Maryland, DC area, a little area in Montgomery County called Kensington, they had a little street that was called Antique Row. And I used to go in there all the time. As a matter of fact, I think that might have been where Maria and I first antiqued together. And I found a couple of, like, cool paintings. I found a couple of cool little like statues. I found an old, like, army knife, you know, like a folding, you know, knife that was just really ornate and cool. So I don't know if there's any one thing I've bought or found that stands out. It's just I enjoy seeing cool stuff, and so I think could be.
That's it, Tony. Next date night, we're going antiquing.
Well, and then I'll go.
All right. So listen, Rhett, so let's bring this full circle for everybody. Thanks for being fun there and teaching us about antiquing. That is something I never would have predicted coming out of this conversation. But so let's get up to your time with Think LP, because I think that really is pertinent.
Sorry. No, go ahead. Before we do that, I just wanted to ask, and I did find those other questions that we talked about, and so I did. And sorry, Rhett, you're probably not prepared for these because you didn't have these questions. But I know one of the questions I got was pretty good here. Is that share us a funny or embarrassing. So obviously you've been an LP a long time, just like Johnny and I have. We're in the industry for a long time. Can you tell us a funny or embarrassing mistake that you made early in your career? And you can use LP or operations or whatnot, but like a mistake. And I'm going to give you an example. I'm going to tell you mine. Okay. So I had just been promoted to my first LP manager job with Montgomery Ward. I had moved to Nashville, New Hampshire, from the Detroit area of Michigan where I lived. And I was like, I'm the guy now, right? Like, I'm the LP manager of this store, right? And it was the holiday time. and there was a HR person who they put in the jewelry section to work, right? But that person was not certified to work in the jewelry section, right? So in my mind, that's against policy. So I literally went out and removed her from the jewelry section and told her she couldn't work in that section. And obviously looking back on that, how it's hilarious, like what an idiot, like obviously you don't look at the big picture, things of that nature. But at the time, I was like, no, that is against policy. Policy is black and white. She hasn't done the training. She can't work in that. And so there's a big, the store manager called my boss called me, all 9 yards away back and forth. And now looking back on it, I'm like, what was I thinking? But yeah, again, at the time it was, I'm LP, I enforce the rules and you can't do that. So rather, maybe not so much funny, but definitely embarrassing, especially now when I look back on it. But anyway, that's just one example. So what I know you weren't prepped, but anything you can think of that you're like, oh, wow, that was embarrassing or funny, or I shouldn't have done that. Or,
like that one time that you told Tony and Johnny about your antiquing, something like that.
Yeah, I'm sure that's going to come back and bite me.
Oh, no.
If I thought about it, I'm sure I could think of a million. The two that come to mind are one was early, and I told you I'd loaded trucks right in a warehouse, and I remembered one time after I'd been there a whole summer, the next summer they're like, listen, you've been here, you can kind of help, lead some of these newbies around. And I remember for a whole morning, probably like 4 hours, I had taken these manifests, that had all the product that was needed to be loaded on these trucks. And I set up these teams, and I'm thinking, oh man, I'm going to be like the supervisor of this warehouse pretty soon. Like I got my shit together. And about 4 hours into these 4 teams loading a truck, and they were probably halfway through the trailer. Now the manager of the warehouse, the distribution center manager, comes over and says, hey, so is this right? Like, you got this guy here, and this says it's going to North Carolina, but you're loading Arizona load in it. Like, I had literally screwed up every single load. So like, one load was going to, the Carolinas, one load was going here, and they were all wrong. And so we had to unload every truck.
And that's a project.
I am like, and I could hear it. I can hear everybody looking at me go, oh yeah, you're going to be the boss of this place someday.
Oh my God. How long did that take? That had to take forever.
Yeah, it took the rest of the day. I mean, to get it right. I mean, I think we stayed late to, get them unloaded, get the right loads in there. And yeah, that was, at that point, I knew distribution center work was probably not going to be my calling. But hey, it was good. The other funny thing was at one of the trade associations, I won't say, I was out, and we happened to be in New Orleans, which is always a mistake. Even though I did take 3 conferences there for 3 different associations, so I'll leave that there. But a bunch of us had been out, and had a great time. It was after a great day at the conference. And this was when we had the Leaders Council meeting at the end of the conference, which after this incident, I made it at the beginning. But it was like the last day, you had to get up at 7 o'clock in the morning, have a quick meeting before the final sessions of the day. So I had been out with a bunch of the VPs and friends of mine, and we go in the next morning, we're all hungover, and I'm sitting at the table and I'm just like picking at fruit, because I don't feel well. And one of the guys walks by me, and I look up and I go, oh, I said, hey, what did you do last night? How was your night? What did you do? And the guy stopped and he looked at me and he says, what are you talking about?
I was with you all night?
The whole night. Yep. So, yeah, at that point, I was like, all right, no more meetings at the end of conferences. Let's put them at the beginning and get it over with.
Right. That's a good story. That's a Rhett story.
Yeah.
No. The second question I won't make you answer because we've already got the answer, and that was, what is something nobody in the industry knows about you? And I'm certain nobody knew about the antiquing. So you know, I would never guess that. But Johnny, sorry, back to your.
No worries. And Rhett, we don't want to keep you too much longer. But listen, let's bring this full circle, right? So you spent some time here at Think LP. You had some great successes here, and you helped position us for success, and we thank you for that. And then you moved on to Alto. So you really, and Tony as well, you guys were both instrumental in helping Alto and Think LP partner with one another. Why was that a priority for you guys? And what do you both kind of think about what this partnership is going to do for the industry?
Well, I'll start. I think so. First of all, I am thankful for my time at ThinkOP. It gave me insight into what a true enterprise, analytics slash platform, incident management platform looks like, and how you can tie data. I mean, I remember, and as I'm sure all three of us do, being in stores with dot matrix sheets of paper and trying to figure out one thing from another, and this doesn't look right, but I don't know, throwing our hands up. But ThinkOP is such a great tool that allows you to look at data in a way that is impossible to do without the way that thing brings data together and correlates it and spits it out in ways that you can literally look at how you run your organization. And one of the things, as I learned more about Alto, was that data is critical to what Alto does, which is take that data, ensure that all the T's are crossed and I's are dotted, so that those other stakeholders that we work with to ensure some sort of adjudication or accountability happens. And so I just thought that, and in addition to that, everybody thought that Alto was a case management system too, right? And that there was all this talk about that Alto's competing in that case management space, and that's just simply not true. I mean, on the Alto side, we have to have an internal system that allows us to track cases and all the work we do on the legal side, but it was never even close to any of the case management systems that are out there, let alone anything like ThinkOP. And so for me, it was like, wow, I've been preaching for years about how vendors should do a better job of working together. That it can't be, a siloed look at the industry. We're such an industry. It's so important that we step outside of our comfort zone and we look at improving profitability and bottom lines. And you can't do that working in a silo. And so I just saw this great opportunity to take that data and then, do something with it, right? Because everybody's got tons of access to data these days. But at the end of the day, if you're not putting it together and then doing something with that data, it's just data. And so I just thought, what a great relationship and a great place to start.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, obviously with practitioner for a long time. And so I always look at ways, like from my practitioner days, how would life be easier, right? And so to your point about, different solution providers working together, I think whatever is helpful for the end user is what we should be shooting for. I also think that, obviously Alto, because of, my past background dealing with ORC, I'm infinitely familiar, right, with that process, with the prosecution and then the struggles, right, that retailers have to follow up on that stuff. So to me, it made sense, right, to help our customers, right, to be able to, pursue that stuff, because I do believe it's always been a big gap in the industry. I mean, Jimmy mentioned at the very beginning of this podcast, right, about the follow up, once somebody is arrested and the follow through. So for me, I think it's, again, that end user, that to make their life easier, but also, the fact that I want to make sure that these things are seen to fruition. And so if I can do both those things at the same time by, having the seamless integration with Alto, I thought it made complete sense. So makes me excited to see what we can do even moving forward as we build upon what we've done so far.
Yeah, it's some pretty exciting stuff. I can't wait. So Rhett, if you'll indulge us, one more question.
Yeah.
What's next? What's next for Rhett? What's next for Alto, or both, or any of the above? What's next, buddy?
Listen, I tell, and people used to joke a lot of times about, Rhett, how many business cards do you own, right? Or how many name tags do you have? Or how many polos do you have in your closet from the various groups you worked with? But listen, I truly believe that path was intentional. I don't mean necessarily I chose every time I was going to leave. I think things just happen that way, but intentional in the fact that I learned so much. I got access to just different situations, groups of people and companies that maybe not everybody always does. And so I'm thankful for all that. What's next? I hope I'm here for the next umpteen years and continue to learn and continue to help, continue to build relationships. And I hope people see me as somebody that was always had the intent of helping others and making people better. Because at the end of the day, that's what it's about. And then, listen, at the end of the day, I think a lot of people think that life's that journey where, they're going to arrive at their grave very safely, leave for the body. And but for me, I want to slide into my grave sideways, totally worn out, yelling, "Holy shit, what a ride!"
I want to give you kudos. My dog will stop barking. One of the things, and Johnny, you mentioned it, right? The dark side, right? Obviously come into the vendor side or solution provider, solution partner. And I think that one thing I feel like you've been able to do, and I try to aspire to do the same thing, is that I am who I am. I haven't changed regardless of what job I have. I don't think you have either. And I think that helps when you're dealing with, your current customer, potential customer. They know that you are who you are. You're not changing in a way to try to get them to buy. So you're not. And I think because of that, people are receptive. When you reach out and you want to have a conversation, I think they have an open door to hear that from you. And you should applaud yourself for that you stay true to yourself. And it's not, I think it's changed in a way as well, industry wise. Like, I don't think it's necessarily looked at as the dark side, but I do hear from folks that struggle with getting people to respond. But I think in some cases, if they look back, they'll see that there's some things that they may have done that contributed, quite frankly, to that, the lack of response they may get. I think that, some of it's maybe self-inflicted, and I certainly don't think that's ever happened with you. So just wanted to call that out.
Oh, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Awesome. Listen, Brett, I can't thank you enough for joining us. I can't thank you for being a good sport and playing along. I hope that you're with us for another 10, 15 years and you don't decide to go off into retirement like so many of our friends are doing these days. Yeah. It's been a pleasure having you on. And with that, thank you. Tony,
thank you.
Any final words?
Thank you, Rhett. And, my youngest daughter still says, my dad's friend. She doesn't know your name, just to be clear. But I appreciate you indulging her. I know occasionally she sends you messages from her iPad as well. And thank you for responding. And warning that one in advance. But no, great to have you on. Great to be working with you. Excited for some of the stuff we're going to be doing together, our two companies. And wish you all the best of luck.
Great, man. Thank you guys so much. Appreciate you having me. And this was a lot of fun.
Awesome. Take care, Brad. Thank you so much, buddy.
All right, guys. Take care.
See you, Tony. See you next time.
Thanks for listening to It's Your Loss, where we explore the strategies, stories, and data driving the future of loss prevention. This podcast is brought to you by ThinkLP, powering loss prevention for over 200 leading retailers and helping protect people and profits around the world. If you got value from today's episode, make sure to subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, or YouTube so you never miss an update. Let's keep the conversation going. Follow Tony Shepard and Johnny Custer on LinkedIn for more insights, stories from the field, and industry updates between episodes. We'll be back soon with more news, more strategy, and yes, probably another crazy loss prevention story or two. Until then, keep protecting people, securing profits, and try not to let it be your loss.